Thank you, Ashel. And again, as always, I'm excited to be here in another TechWell event, whether it's virtual or on-premise. I'm always happy. And today I have with me Shani Shoam. Hi, Shani.
Hey, Ewan, how are you doing?
Living the dream. Happy to be here with you and talk about what is actually intelligent test automation and how high growth companies are taking their testing initiatives to the next level. So I think we have a packed agenda for today, but maybe before that, let's say a word about ourselves. You start, Shani?
Sure. So, Shani Shoam, most recently the founder and CEO of 21 Labs, which does intelligent test automation for mobile applications. 21 is actually my first testing company. So, started my testing journey actually with you at Perfecto many years ago. And kind of seeing the transition to agile. So the challenges around test automation, joined Testim.io as president and COO, and then 21 Labs. I'm an engineer by background. You don't want me writing any lines of code, but I can go pretty deep and technical.
I've seen some of your profession, so I'm not afraid of seeing some code coming from you, Shani. We're going to talk today a bit about both the mix of coding and mixing code with low code and even no code as part of the testing strategies. A word about myself. So I'm a senior director at Perforce, also an evangelist and author of few books. Partnered with Shani also on few of my books as well. So we go a long way together. And again, I'm truly happy to have him with me today in the webinar. In the webinar today, we're going to talk a bit about some of the things that we are seeing that really drives the biggest challenges in software testing. Myself, together with Perfecto, we did an test automation survey this year, and we found a lot of things, but it's not just Perfecto. I've read so many different surveys over the past few months, and we kind of aggregated few of the challenges that are leading to these trends that we're going to present to you in this webinar. We are definitely going to talk a bit about AI and machine learning. We're going to kind of demystify a lot of the things that people think about AI and machine learning, but really zoom in into the values of AI and machine learning in testing and the real values, not the FUD, the real things that you can benefit from. Myself and Shani are going to also walk you through a very short demo of the intelligent test automation as of today, as time permits, so we can actually show you something real that you can learn from today in this webinar. So let's get started. As I mentioned, there are challenges in today's DevOps reality, agile, and most of the challenges are coming from the testing aspect. A lot of manual testing, maybe too many manual testing is happening, and it can be attributed to many reasons. We won't dive into each and every reason in this webinar, but we are going to talk a bit about the things that cause flakiness, the things that are delaying the test automation creation, the differences in test creation when you're trying to automate a mobile application versus a web application. Regardless if it's with code or without code, it's still challenging, and we're going to address that. But if looking at the numbers today, it's the reality that shows that the majority of the companies today are still kind of in a waiting time before they can really start test automation creation upon a build that is being delivered to them. So there is the continuous testing and the shift left is not really happening across the board. Obviously, there are mature organizations that figure it out and they are doing it, but it's not the common practice across different organizations. And we see the results, right? The majority of the market is still in the monthly release cadence with additional chunk doing weekly releases. Shani, do you see the same things when you are talking with your clients?
Yeah, so, two things, two comments on that slide. First of all, I am happy to see the trend towards, weekly and monthly releases. I would say that, a few of the recent customers that I spoke to even though they're releasing, some of them even release daily, but definitely weekly, still their testing practices lag behind. And, that's kind of the reason that we're talking, is the fact that they're trying to accelerate or to embed testing as part of their sprint and as part of the release cycles. But still, some of them, they're like, doing a lot of manual testing and not really, they don't really have great coverage, and they know that, and that's kind of the reason why we're typically talking. But I do see a certain improvement from prior years. Again, definitely the release cycles are faster than they used to be. I would say on web, probably testing during the sprint is a little more common than on mobile. I'm sure we'll talk about that later today.
Definitely. And just before people start yelling at me, I have nothing against manual or exploratory testing, okay? Just to be clear, there is a room for manual and exploratory testing, whether it's a mobile or a web application. There is definitely room and there is value, okay? But we need to balance the manual and the automated testing within the cycle in the right cadence, phases upon each pull request, so the feedback is still relevant. So don't get us wrong, it's not that we are against manual testing, but there are manual testing that needs to be automated in the sense that they will enable the fast feedback that is required to drive velocity within the pipeline.
Maybe I'll just echo what you said. So first of all, I've worked with thousands of organizations. I don't think there's a single one that where 100% of the coverage is automated. So typically it's somewhere between 80 to 100% if you're in a good state, and there's always going to be some use cases or some scenarios that either are too complex to automate or the cost of automating them is just too high. And so there's always room for some manual testing. But again, if I, like an example of an organization that I talked to yesterday, where they're doing daily builds, it's literally impossible to just test all of those scenarios in manually. And so you want to balance between automated testing and manual testing.
Cool. Thank you for that, Shani. Just so you know, since it's live, I'm also challenging all the audience, everyone that is participating. I just texted you all. Feel free to challenge myself and Shani with anything around testing, test automation, intelligent test automation. As we move forward with the webinar, we are happy and ready to address anything. Shani is more ready than I am, but we'll do our best to address anything that you have. So continuing with the previous slide, I'll move forward quite fast on that because it's just echoing what we just talked about. The majority of the organization are trying to move from the walk towards the run and the Devops Cicd journeys. But again, testing is kind of slowing them down. So that's the reality. These are just few more statistics that we have learned while doing all the recent surveys. So it's just kind of a backup slide and backup information to the previous one. This is, in my mind, a very important question that we ask almost in every occasion when we are dealing with new clients. But who is responsible for testing today? And if you ask me as a previous director of quality, everyone who is within the dev team and testing team are responsible for testing. Anyone needs to be the owner of quality, because quality is top of mind for everyone within the team. But when you are asking who is responsible for testing and you're trying to cut between the different market segment, you would see that 45% of the people that responded were saying that it's still an internal QA that supports the development. So it's still kind of, the blame today is still on the QA folks, that they need to worry about quality. And this is a bit disturbing in my mind, because you cannot talk about shift left, agile, DevOps, and still be living in this siloed approach. You need to have both the dev team, DevOps engineering, and QA working together towards the same goal of doing test automation and manual testing, as I mentioned earlier, throughout the entire sprint. Otherwise, you cannot manage. And to be successful, you need to divide the tools that you are using based on the skill set and the objectives that each of these personas own. What do you think about that, Shani, about this statistic?
Yeah, so two comments. One, definitely, most of the testing is still done by QA. I think it's easier said than done. I think it's, you mentioned the entire organization has to be responsible for quality. Again, a lot of organizations say that, but it's really, it's a culture, it's a DNA, it's values. And I've seen very few organizations that actually walk the talk. I can think of, literally I can count on one hand the number of organizations that I spoke to where, literally the developers, as they're writing a feature, they're also writing tests to test that feature, and not just unit testing. I think on mobile, I'm seeing a little more involvement from dev, and actually a lot of the calls that I get on are typically with, a team, the Android team lead, the iOS team lead, someone more in development than just in QA. And so I see a little bit more alignment on mobile than I see on web. But yeah, I'm not surprised with the results. And I would say predominantly it's still a QA, world.
And I think, Shani, once we reach a later stage in this webinar, we'll actually see the evolution of testing and how tools evolve to actually enable all of these different personas within the organization to contribute to testing. Because if it's not easy for developers and it's not kind of integrated into their business processes, they won't do it. And you can force them and they will do it, but they need to do it as part of their daily activities, and they need to feel comfortable doing so. And the tools play a very important part in how they can adopt and how they can develop new test cases. Because as we know, creating test automation, it's not a one and done. You need to maintain it over time. You need to make sure that they continuously run upon each code change. We'll talk a bit about how these statistics and the evolution of these statistics kind of drove the rise of new tools as we see them today.
Correct. And we'll also talk about the new era, which I think brings much more alignment in between dev and QA and kind of the vision of everybody responsible for quality.
Definitely. So what I've done in this slide, I took almost each and every state of test automation report that I've read in 2020 and 2021 up until today, and just put the top bullets that kind of got repeated upon each survey, upon each report. And you can see it here. We don't need to read all the words here, but obviously better coverage, more automation percentage within the pipeline is top of mind for CIOs and IT leaders and developers as well. Just so you know, the fact that they're not doing it, it doesn't mean that they don't care about it. We need to enable them. They need to be enabled to do it more efficiently. Shift left is also shifting into higher gear. It becomes very, very important as DevOps and Agile matures. I can actually say also a bit more about shift right. People are talking a lot about shift left and are forgetting how shift right can also help the shift left engine. As we move with this webinar, I know that Shani has a lot to say about how shift left and shift right kind of communicate, but we'll leave that to the end. You need to stick around to hear his point of view. I love this point of view from him. Obviously, top performers are addressing automation skill gaps either via tools, trainings, adopting agile methodologies like TDD and BDD. This is something that we've seen across the board, across all different reports, and it drives success and successful results. If you look at the webinar title, it states how high growth companies are testing in 2021. More and more organizations are mixing intelligent test automation with more intelligent methodologies, including TDD and BDD. We've seen it also as part of the research. DevOps is often differentiated. We know that. but it's differentiated by the following criteria: rapid release frequency, fully automated CI/CD pipeline. So there are different objectives to DevOps. In my mind, it's not one versus the other, it's all of the above. And at the end of the day, you want to release faster with fast feedback, with high quality, and you want to have continuous learning machine, so you feed back to the developers from production and continuously learn. There are more, insights that we've seen here, like the shift left through A/B testing, cloud-based testing. But I think these are the main things that we are seeing in addition to the previous slides that we have just shown you.
And just one comment about cloud-based testing. I've seen an increase in the demand for cloud-based testing in the last 18 months, due to COVID. I think the pandemic, especially on mobile, kind of the practice of, moving devices from one person to the other. Again, with people working from home, you no longer have access to those devices. Even ones that have on-site, on-premise labs, they haven't been able to access those labs in the last couple of months. And so I think the pandemic definitely increased the adoption of cloud-based testing. And I'm even seeing kind of large organizations that were kind of in the mindset of, hosting that internally, actually compromising on, some of the security concerns and other concerns that they had in the past, just to kind of adapt to the remote working environment of today.
Sure. Thank you for that, Shani. Definitely cloud these days, and it was kind of a growing trend for the past decade, but obviously with the pandemic, it became kind of the de facto enabler for remote testing. So it's not a surprise. By the way, I see some questions coming in. Feel free to ask us more questions. We will address all of them, I promise, either during the webinar or after the webinar. What we also seen as part of the state of test automation and how mature testing teams are doing testing today. Again, we focus mostly on digital apps, mobile and web, and we have seen that there is a standardization in test automation frameworks. Before talking about the intelligent testing and just talking about the test automation frameworks, we have seen a huge boost over the past 1.5 years with the adoption of Cypress, Playwright, and also Flutter. We have also seen Cypress and Selenium in the web front kind of taking their own, I would say, playground. And the majority of developers and test engineers today in the web, in the front-end web testing technologies, are using Cypress and or Selenium. On the mobile front, it's still Appium that is backed by Espresso and XUI Test, Google and Apple's frameworks. Appium is just around the corner with its next version, Appium 2.0. Flutter is a growing technology. It's not just testing, it's the full-blown cross-platform applications. We are seeing a lot of high-growth companies and also enterprises, major enterprises, looking at Flutter as their next go-to technology, so they can build within a single source code multiple applications, web, mobile, and desktop. So Flutter is an enabler for that. We'll talk a bit about testing Flutter applications in an intelligent way also when Shani is talking a bit about his playground, if you like. So I would say this is how mostly the mobile and web testing landscape looks like today. Again, on the mobile, it's led by Appium, Espresso, and XUI Test. Flutter is challenging everything. And on the web, it's mostly Cypress.io and Selenium with Playwright from Microsoft becoming a challenger to these two frameworks. Shani, I know that you particularly loved this slide, especially the right end that talks about 61% looking at adopting AI and machine learning in testing. Why did you like that trend?
Well, so I would say over the last 7 years, I've kind of seen the adoption of AI and machine learning, and again, when we just started doing I guess what's called codeless, and again, I think it's a misleading word, but it was really just an early adopters play. And I'm seeing how the transition from, oh, this is just a simple play record, to actually there's value into that. And so that's on the one, and on the other, I think also technology has evolved to actually have some meaningful value from AI and machine learning. So it's no longer just a buzzword. Just one quick anecdote. I got on the call earlier today with a new prospect, and he actually reminded me that we spoke about 4 or 5 years ago. He was working for a small company. They actually adopted an AI-based testing solution. Then he went for a larger organization where they used coded solutions, and now he's shifting back to a small organization, and again, he's looking to adopt these kind of tools. And so I think with high growth companies, they, really they're growing so fast that they don't necessarily have the capacity of, going through a 12 or 18-month journey towards the coded solution, and that's where they're looking to utilize AI and ML, and that therefore I'm not surprised with those results. One final comment: I think AI and ML can mean different things. It can mean just smart locators, natural language processing, and converting test cases in plain language into scripted test cases. So there's all kinds of variations around AI and ML, which I'm sure we're going to talk about later on.
Definitely. And I see more questions coming in, and this is great. Thank you for your participation. And what about the other trends? Because AI machine learning testing is great, and we'll soon jump into that topic. But we also see, especially on the mobile front, few other trends going, including the 5G adoption, foldable smartphones, and progressive web. And if you look at the left side, with Flutter growing as a cross-platform technology, progressive web is exactly the same. It's a cross-platform technology coming from the web vendors to enable one source code that runs both on web and on mobile. So we are also seeing this trend. Maybe it's not moving as fast as we would anticipate, but the move towards a single code base across web and mobile is a hot trend that we are seeing, either coming from web technology vendors or from Google itself, which is the owner of Flutter. We'll see how it evolves in the upcoming year or two. So with that, I think it's no surprise that the test automation maturity is not high enough. I haven't met a high growth company and also an enterprise that really passes the 60% test automation success rate. The majority are even way below. And I'm willing to be challenged, because whenever I say this number, people say, yeah, I have 80% test automation. What are you talking about? So no, when I talk about 60 or 70% test automation, I talk about every test. Okay, I talk about functional testing, I'm talking about API testing, I'm talking about performance testing and accessibility testing and security. Okay, so people think that the UI testing and the functional testing is the entire bucket. No, we're talking about continuous testing in DevOps, in Agile. It requires you to do automation of every test, or the majority of the test cases that you have. And surprisingly, it's not just the functional testing, it's also the non-functional, which is accessibility, security, and performance, but also other layers. And when we pile into this number the other non-functional test cases, it actually brings down the percentage of success rate and automation as a whole to a lower number. So that's what we mean by this number. Before we move to the intelligent test automation part here, just a summary slide, and it has a few more buckets than we covered, but this is, in my mind, the driver to why intelligent test automation is so important. Shani mentioned earlier that these high growth companies don't have time, they are growing that fast, and they need this, and I saw a lot of questions about what do you mean by shift left. So I'll actually answer the shift left while I talk about these challenges, because it came up a few times already. So when you are trying to automate upon each pull request, upon each code change, and you want to keep up with this weekly cadence of releases, you can only do it by automating as much as possible and gathering this fast feedback. So shift left means you are, as it sounds, right? You are pulling the majority of your test cases towards the build cycle as part of your continuous integration process, so it can drive faster feedback upon each code change, so you as a developer, project manager, QA manager can assess the impact of the code changes on your quality, on your application quality. And to do so, again, you need less test flakiness, you need fast environment setup, whether it's web and mobile, you need to be able to automate advanced scenarios, you need to have all the environment that you can think of, you need to be able to have proper insights so you understand the root cause of the failure. You need the data across different devices, operating system, geographies. It needs to be connected to the product requirements and the user stories. So all of these challenges kind of contribute to why shift left is not as successful as it should, okay, but also kind of explains what it takes to really shift left all your testing. When everything here on this, even though it's all red, I put it in green because I'm a positive guy. You know, when you put all of these challenges and you solve them, this is when shift left really happens. Again, maybe not to the full extent, but much better.
If I can add two things, so shift left is testing as early as possible in the development cycle. So if a developer, is able to test his code before merging, it's much easier to, isolate issues and isolate, reproduce, and detect bugs, versus if you merge that into master, and now you have a bunch of branches that were merged into one, and now you have a bug, and you have to figure out that bug is related to, which feature or which branch that you worked on. So that's what it means. Now, again, like you said, there's a lot of implications to that, because if you want to be able to test in the developer's branch, you need the data, you need the environment, you need to have concurrent sessions, because the developer is not going to wait, for 5 hours or for 2 hours for 50 or 100 test cases to complete. Again, his time is valuable and he wants to move on. It also means that if you're making any changes to the application, you now need to be able to adjust those test cases on the fly. And right now, with a lot of the solutions, the cycle to updating those tests is some between a few hours to a few days. So those are some of the challenges that prevent shift left. There's a couple of other challenges that are related more to mobile specifically, which is the development framework that you're using. Applications like Flutter or React are very difficult to test. You don't have those challenges on web, but you do have those challenges on mobile. Accessing mobile devices, virtual devices, real devices. So there's a lot of other challenges that explain the number that Ron showed on the previous slide.
Cool. And before we move to the next slide, there is a great question. Guys, if you can put the questions in the Q&A so we won't miss them. It was sent in the public chat, but talking about the considerations when you do a test automation feasibility, I think that some of these things are actually on the slide here, but to make sure that the test automation is not just shifted left, but it's also very stable, you need to have a proper test environment in place. You need to have proper analysis of the element locators. Shani just mentioned about different dev frameworks that contribute to the flakiness of the elements, or the dynamic nature of these elements, so you are not always able to locate these. And when you're not locating the right element, obviously you cannot automate. So the environments themselves, the element locators, the best practices that you follow, treating test code as production code, maintaining the code, looking at changes that are happening or failures. If you look at the history of the test and you're disregarding the failures or the flakiness, you're just carrying backlog of flakiness from one build to the next and kind of adding noise to the pipeline. So this is, again, not a one and done. continuous testing requires continuous maintenance of your test environment and your test scenarios, whether they are written with code or without code. You need to maintain them. That's the only way you can sustain test automation.
And there was another question, if we're trying to make it interactive. So there was another question around why shouldn't the developer wait? So again, he can wait, but there's, if you have a bunch of scenarios and now you have to test that on different browsers or different devices, and now he has to wait for 2 or 3 hours for that suite to complete. Again, he's not going to sit idle. So in the meantime, he's probably going to work on another branch, and now there's the cost of, context switching from, one branch to the other. Yeah. It's easier if he gets, he just goes and have coffee, and in 5-10 minutes he get the results back, and now he can fix whatever needs to be fixed. So the longer you wait, the more expensive it is to, reproduce, set up the environments, for the developer to go back into a code that he wrote, depending on how long ago. And so that's the reason you wanna give fast feedback. Again, if you're doing that 8-9 times a day, then it becomes expensive to wait an hour or two to get that feedback.
Yeah, and just this waiting period, it's not something that the developer has a say in. Okay, think about it's not just one developer. We're talking about squads or different teams of development, and they are tied with time constraints. They need to release a build for integration testing or something else based on a schedule. So they're not always in a position that they can really wait. That's why you need to be also kind of agile, and this shift left plays nicely to that. Let's stop here with the questions. We'll get to more questions, and I'm really happy to see this participation. This is why I stopped. We usually wait until the end with Q&A, but I wanted to be more interactive, and there were so many good questions that were really attached to the content that we are presenting. I wanted it to be really timely. So let's move now to the intelligent test automation part of this webinar, and how we believe that AI and machine learning not just evolved, but actually already today can address some of the challenges. And mark my words, I'm talking about some of the challenges. AI machine learning is not a magic trick that solves everything that we presented up until now. AI machine learning, and for those of you, and I actually have written a book about AI machine learning in testing, so I supposed to understand a bit about that. And each algorithm which deals with AI machine learning can solve a specific challenge, okay? One algorithm cannot solve everything. So Shani mentioned examples of looking at test maintenance, looking at objects and element locators, data analysis, root cause analysis, analyzing logs and observability. There are different algorithms and different solutions that are driven by AI and machine learning. Each has their own objective. Obviously, there can be a collection of AI-based solutions that at the end of the day can help mature continuous testing and DevOps. But you need to remember that there is no kind of a magic trick for everything. You need to be aware of that machine learning can be just a simple algorithm within a full solution, but it establishes a baseline for more stable automation. With that, let's talk about how things evolve up until today, and maybe where we are heading with that. Shani, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So, I think kind of going back to the days of the dinosaurs, the simple solution was a plan we called the next level of AI and machine learning was really about, smart locators and solving the issue of flakiness and testability. This was super relevant for web, where I think the biggest complaint that I've been hearing from customers about Selenium was the stability and the fact that every time the DOM changes, then a bunch of tests starts to fail. And so certain companies emerged to have one of two: either have a list of CSS selectors and analyze the DOM during execution to find the right selector in real time, or alternatively use machine learning and learn from each and every execution which elements or which CSS selectors have actually changed, and constantly maintain a scoring mechanism around all of these CSS selectors. I think I would also say, by the way, that there was another subset of solutions around AI, which was converting, natural language using NLP to convert plain, text into test cases. I've been pretty hesitant with that approach because I think at the end of the day it's very similar to like BDD. You just you create your own abstraction language, but it's not really pure writing a test case as you speak. It's essentially using an abstraction layer and certain language that's one level above the code, but at the end of the day converting that into code base. So I've seen a few companies do that with some limited value. The next level of AI and machine learning is I think what we're saying today, and we'll even demonstrate some of that, and that's more sophisticated AI, to address things like lengthy page loading, to address things like updating test cases on the fly, and essentially applying one change to other tests. The ability to learn the application and things that are a little more complex than just smart locators. And what I'm really excited about, and I'm starting to see customers asking for those type of solution, and I'm starting to see early signs of solutions emerging, is actually the ability not just to shift left, but also to shift right. And we'll talk about that in the next slide, but essentially it's leveraging production data for dev and QA. But this is kind of, and again, I feel fortunate that over the years I've been able to see that evolution from the pure plain record to smart locators to more advanced capabilities of AI and machine learning, and hopefully in the near future towards shifting right.
Definitely, Shani. So with that in mind, I think let's talk a bit about self-healing objects, because Shani was mentioning earlier the smart locators. For that, I want to show you a short demo. Let's see. And Shani, let me know that you can see my screen. I trust you. Can you see my screen, my browser?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to try something. When we try something live, it's usually failing, but I have my trust in the platform. So I'm going, since it's a TechWell event, okay? So you see the website, I'm going to automate the TechWell event live and show you how we capture the smart locators using machine learning. So I'm going to start building a new web test, okay? So with that, I'm going to start a new project. Okay, we'll call it TechWell Webinar. Okay, we'll call it Exploratory. Okay, and here I'm going to put the URL that I want to test on, and this is going to be techwell.com. I'm going to spin up a new virtual machine running Chrome 87 on Windows 10 in the US East region. And what's going to happen right now, a new VM is going to be launched for me, with the homepage being the techwell.com. I'm going to just do an exploratory testing on the nice conferences that TechWell are doing. I'm not a marketer for TechWell, believe me, but I thought it's going to be nice, since it's a TechWell event, to show you their website and see if it actually works. I actually didn't try it. I'm doing it live right now with you guys. So as you can see, a new VM, a Chrome, is launched. We are on the techwell.com. And what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to click on conferences. As you can see, now this object exposes few actions that me as a tester can do. Okay, I can click on it, I can do text validation. okay, or visual analysis of this object, I want to click on it. So I'm going to do a mouse click on the conferences, and as you can see, a new command was added left to my test cases, and you can see here that there are start software testing conferences, and there are Agile and Devops conferences. I'm going to speak later this year in the Agile and Devops conference, so I'm going to click on the Agile and Devops conferences and see if it opens. I hope it does. Luckily, it does. And I'm going to click on this conference, Agile DevOps East. Okay, and this is the home page. Now I'm going to validate this text or visually, or the image, just to make sure that I landed on the right page. Okay, so I've added a validation point, and you can see actually the icons. Okay, that's a mouse click, that's a navigation, and this is a checkpoint that I'm doing, an assertion. Now I'm going to stop, finish my test. Okay, and it took me, I don't know, 1 minute and 53. I don't need to guess. 1 minute and 53 to just create this basic exploratory test. Let me just rerun it as a debugging action to make sure that it works, okay, and see that it works. Once it works, I just want to go back and show you the smart locators so you would understand what is happening also in the background from one execution to the next. So right now, again, a fresh new VM is loaded with initialization and going to the homepage of the TechWell website. It goes there, it will click on conferences, Agile DevOps, very fast, and it will validate the image. Everything passed. I'm a good tester, I like that. Now, let's go and see it in the canvas, okay? On the canvas, you can see here when I click on that, okay, you see here, this is the advanced element settings. I can click on that and I can go to the weights. This is the brain, if you like, that's the machine learning engine behind the scenes that really scans through the entire DOM tree of the web application per each page between each run, and it aggregates and gives the scoring, if you like, to all of these attributes. You can see here all the different attributes that the engine was able to collect, and obviously it's going to check the element that has the highest probability of being found. This obviously reduces the flakiness when you are creating a new test case, and it can vary, it can change from the end user, the tester perspective, whether it's the developer or the test engineer. It doesn't matter. It happens automatically through a machine learning algorithm, allowing the test to always run, to always pass, and this goes between each element in the DOM tree. And I could have made this test obviously longer, etc., but this is basically how it works. I can also connect this test, now that it works, into my CI. I can schedule it, to run as a job within Jenkins or other CI tools, or different schedule, or run it in parallel across multiple virtual machines and browsers to test the layout. But basically, this is a nice flow that really has an intelligent layer baked into it. So this is a very short demo that I wanted to show you. And for those of you online that are working for TechWell, your website is working. We just validated it. And now we can go back to the slides. Let's see how we do that. I will click on the slide.
And I think what you showed is nice, but let's maybe talk about the next level of AI and machine learning.
It's a good idea. You want that one?
Yeah. So mind if I take that one?
Yeah, old man.
Okay. So since we're challenging ourselves with doing things live, so I'll do things live as well. Let me know if you can see my screen.
I can. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So first of all, what Ron showed was about again using multiple attributes to find the element. So the same thing you can apply for mobile. Again, use a combination of properties on mobile. These are things like resource ID, accessibility ID, class name, content description. One of the things that's more relevant in mobile than web is also using things like bounds of the element to position on the screen, assuming you convert from one screen resolution to another. So the idea of using multiple attributes to find the element is kind of what we refer to as the second generation of AI. This is especially relevant, and I kind of alluded to that on mobile, because on mobile you have cross-platform frameworks that don't necessarily expose the object when being rendered on a mobile device. So I'll just show two examples of that. So you can see here a screen, and when I show you how the object tree looks like, you can see most of these elements have no IDs, so it's very difficult to identify them. Now, we can potentially use XPath, but XPath is very unstable, and so if I would avoid using XPath. You can see there's a bunch of text that appears on the view but doesn't even get rendered on the object tree. I'll show you another edge case on mobile. This is iOS. This is a React application. You can see those text boxes. So when I hover on them in the object tree, you can see them, but you can see again they have no ID. So how do you know whether to click on, first name, last name, email address? How do you differentiate between them? And so that's where you want to use things like OCR, for example, first name, and that's where you might want to use things like maybe computer vision to actually find those elements. So again, this is another abstraction layer on top of kind of your standard locator system, especially critical for mobile given the development frameworks that are emerging. And I would say about somewhere between a third to half of the application that I'm seeing these days are based on React and based on Flutter. And Appium, doesn't really have good support for those frameworks, and so that's why you need those abstraction layers. So far, we only spoke about we mainly spoke about the locator system, but again, I was referring to the next generation of AI and machine learning being the ability to actually learn the application, model the application, and have some intelligence into your testing. And this is another example that you can see where essentially we learn the structure of the application, from the test cases that the tester is creating, and what that allows us to do. And again, this is under the hood. There's actually a self-learning engine that creates this graph, if you will.
Shani, can you try and zoom into that screen a bit? The audience wants to see it a bit closer.
Yeah, sure. So that would be your typical, kind of which screens navigate to which screens. And if I'll talk a little bit about the applicability of that, I'll just show two ways by which you utilize that. So the first one is the ability to pre-build tests. So again, once we're aware of the test cases, then I can just tell the AI, hey, this is the flow that I want to test, and essentially will populate the actions based on that. And you can see I'm literally just flying through the flow, and the actions are being populated autonomously. And again, I can update those test cases or those actions. The other way that the AI can apply is if you're performing an action, we know that action leads to a next screen, we can populate that next screen. So when you're doing it that way, again, the effort to create a test case is much faster, and now you can actually start testing in the development cycle. One last thing that I'll talk about, I think the challenge of test automation maintenance is something that I hear from literally each and every customer that I talk to, and so one of those challenges is how quickly can you update test once something changes in the application. So let's say that we just made an update in the flow and we introduce a new screen as part of our flow. So auto maintenance is essentially the ability to run an impact analysis every time you make a change to a test and analyze which other test cases present a similar pattern. And then, you can literally select all test cases and apply. And then, that change that we just made to one test will get applied to all the other tests. Just one quick benchmark. We actually had a customer where they had to make that change. They, certain privacy policy came in California, and they had to show a certain pop-up. It literally took them 2 minutes to update over 30 test cases because they only had to update that once and then apply that to all the other ones. Just to show you what's happening under the hood, I'm actually going to take, let's take maybe one of those test cases. Let's take demo 1, 2, 3. I'm actually going to keep those changes tentative. And if I go to demo 1, 2, 3, you can see there's a little maintenance icon, and you can see that we just plugged in, that change that we applied to one test, and essentially we applied that to other tests. And again, in this case, since I didn't confirm the change, the user would actually have to accept or decline that change. So that's automated maintenance. So again, I think what we're starting to see is other cases that go beyond just smart locators and self-healing, and go into addressing all kinds of challenges around cross-platform framework, addressing all kinds of challenges around the maintainability of automated tests.
Thank you, Shani, and I think you already addressed a few of the questions that came while you were presenting. Another question that came in, and I will address it, within Perfecto N21, we can address any objects, whether it's a hybrid application, native application, Flutter application, React. We can support any type of application. And another question that came in, we can do API testing with scriptless for web. I didn't demonstrate it, but we have a demo ready to show you how you can automate API testing with the scriptless for web, so it's also doable if you need to do it.
I would say you can even test the device itself. So I can literally go into the device home and click on an app, open a Google Chrome, navigate to an address, and test any website. So you have full control over the device.
Awesome. With the time that we have left, let's briefly talk a bit about the future of AI machine learning. I'm happy that we already responded to a lot of the questions, not all of them, but at least for some of them we already responded. So I feel a bit relieved now that some of you guys online already received some of the answers. Shani, do you want to talk a bit about the future, how you see it?
Yeah, I think, about 10, 15 minutes ago, we talked a little bit about shifting left and, whether it's actually happening or not. And I think part of the challenge is also that the developers don't necessarily see enough value. And, this infinite loop that you're seeing on the slide, that, we've been talking about that for ages, about closing the feedback loop. But in my view, the feedback loop is still broken. And, and a question that I tend to ask CTOs and VPs of engineering is, if a bug happens in production, how confident are you that, there's an automated test case that actually gets created to make sure that that bug doesn't reoccur? So I think the feedback loop is still, somewhat broken. How many times have developers seen a new feature that's being released, how it's actually being used? There's tons of data in production around how users use the application, around all kinds of crash reports. And, today feeding that information back to dev and QA is in most cases done manually. So yeah, I think there's an opportunity, and that's kind of, in my view, the next generation of AI and machine learning. There's an opportunity to actually close that feedback loop. There's a lot of use cases around that, and I think the technology today is there to support that. Whether it's if the application crashes, then actually create an automated step. We already know what's the steps to reproduce, and there's enough intelligence to be able to say where the scenario starts and where the scenario ends, to be able to create an automated case, including crash logs, knowing which devices you're testing on. There's a lot of information around, what users are using in production in terms of platforms, devices, OS versions, etc. So, kind of being able to create a correlation between what you're testing and what users are doing in production and make sure that there's alignment. And also down the line, again, use production data and again, how users use the application to be able to create automated cases based on that and to be able to learn the changes in the application. The technology is there. And I'm actually seeing a few companies that are starting to do that, and very excited about that. We actually back in the days, we actually created an integration between CDPs such as Mixpanel and Amplitude to be able to correlate between events in production and events in testing so that you can actually measure coverage. And so again, I think that's kind of the next generation of AI and machine learning in testing, which brings much more visibility into what's happening in production.
Cool. Thank you, Shani, for that. And again, thank you for the audience for sending us so many questions. I doubt we can reach to all of the questions because I'm just looking at the list. It's very long. We'll try to gather whatever we haven't answered live already. Michelle, Shelby, do you want to take the lead on the questions, pick what we didn't answer?
Yeah, sure thing. Very good, gentlemen. We do have a few minutes for Q&A, and over a dozen questions did come in. We had a question from Laura. She's curious on how do you address CI/CD in highly regulated industries such as healthcare?
Great question and a great challenge. Luckily, I'm also wearing a second hat in this webinar. I'm in charge within Perforce for the SAST product line, the static code analysis tools, which is very, very critical in the highly regulated industries because they need to comply with both security, safety, and compliance. So I think this together with what we have shown, I think comes together. CI/CD is not specific to any industry. You can do continuous testing and continuous integration in healthcare and defense and aerospace and other industries. We look at the automotive segment, right, with autonomous cars. It's a highly regulated industry because it's a life and death thing here. So they're doing CI/CD by merging both the shift left within testing in CI, but also they're doing a lot of code analysis, static and dynamic, that is kind of building on top of the other things that they're doing. The mix of doing static code analysis prior to the CI allows them to identify a lot of the risks and challenges and kind of gives them the basic level of confidence before they run the regression cycle and the other aspects of testing. So CI/CD is happening. It's obviously a bit more slow in the highly regulated industries. It's not daily because the scope is higher, but they are automating as much as they can. They're using mock services. They're doing a lot of static code analysis, and with that, they're able to maximize, the automation and reduce the time to market. So
I actually find that highly regulated industries it's actually easier to do CI/CD because by nature from day one they have separate environments for dev, QA, staging versus production, versus other industries where sometimes they don't necessarily have a separate environment, so you're actually testing on the same data that's in production, which makes it very difficult because that data is constantly dynamic. The other thing that I find is that highly regulated industry, there's a greater need for test automation because they have to show that they're compliant, and they actually went through a specific set of scenarios, and they actually have to document that. It's very difficult to do that when you're doing that manually. High overhead of documenting everything. So I actually find it to be a lot easier to work with customers in regulated industries.
Cool. Do we have time for one more question at least, Rachel?
We're actually at the top of the hour, unfortunately. But yeah, if you want to do one more question,
I've
is there a particular one that you wanted to answer?
Yes, I've seen a question about, what would be the benefits obtained from AI machine learning except of the web elements auto healing. So I think there are several benefits of using AI machine learning. Okay, one is the maintenance and the auto healing that Shani was talking about. The second one is the time to market. You saw how much time it took me to create an exploratory test flow. This was for web. Shani was demonstrating the same thing for mobile. So the time to market, the time to creation of test automation, which is more stable, is the second benefit of AI and machine learning. Again, testing, it's not being done only once, it's done many times. A third thing is that with these kind of tools, you can automate things that you simply are challenged for good. We talked about Flutter and React Native and other apps that will take you forever to automate, especially on the mobile phone, because of the dynamic nature of this application. So there are many benefits. I only covered a few, and it's depending also on the use cases of using machine learning, because the machine learning can also serve observability and reporting and data coming from production. So there are a lot of benefits. It depends on the use case within the testing flow.
Just to close the topic, since we're talking about high growth companies, I think I mentioned that kind of high growth companies usually they're trying to keep up with hiring, and it's not like they have a QA team of dozens of people, and so time is very critical for them. Most of the organizations that I've seen using AI and machine learning, the cycle to get to continuous testing is measured in weeks. It's somewhere between 4 to 6 weeks. A lot of the POCs that we've done, I would say, in the last 2 years have been, you literally connect to the Cicd, by the second week. Yeah. And typically, the cycles for scripted solution, and again, I think there's a room for both, but typically with scripted solution, it just takes about 2 months to connect to the device lab, takes another month or two just to set up the framework. So you're looking at different cycles, and so that's again to echo the time element that you spoke about and close circle on how high growth companies actually test and release.
So the benefit is also the cost here. So
it's cost and time and time to value.
Got it. Cool. So I'm sorry that we kind of exceeded by a few minutes this webinar, but we got so many questions and we wanted to answer as many as we could. So back to you, Rachel.
Yeah, those are actually a great set of questions that came throughout the presentation. But due to time constraints, if your question was not answered live, the speakers will directly contact you via email with the answers. This concludes our presentation for today. I'd like to thank Aran and Shani for their time, along with our sponsor, Perfecto by Perforce. A special thank you goes out to our audience as well for spending your time with us. And thank you, and have a great day.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.